So I think that the regulatory profession is very important because it is essentially the conduit between the science that can be very complex, very advanced, very innovative, and you're essentially your job as a regulatory professional or a regulatory scientist is to be able to communicate these concepts in a way that will translate to what does this do for the patient? What will this mean to people who have access to it ultimately in the market? And sometimes that's not always easy. And what do we have to do to get from point A to B to C to E to F to G and ultimately to market? So I got in regulatory affairs kind of by accident. I think probably similarly to many. Um, After graduate school, I joined a consulting company that was quite small. It had two sort of sides of the business. One was regulatory scientific consulting, and the other was defense for pharma, essentially counsel. I pretty much started working exclusively on the regulatory side, and I found that it fit me quite nicely as a personality, and also leveraged some of my strengths as having a scientific background, while also having a pretty good knack for writing and communicating important messaging, and it just seemed to be a good fit. So, my current role is I work as a U.S. and global regulatory strategist for a Japanese company, Eisai, and who specializes in neurology and oncology products mostly. So my day to day can vary, depends on the projects I'm working on. Essentially, right now we're in some early and mid stage development. So a lot of what I do is liaise with my cross functional teams in order to essentially submit clinical trial applications, submit protocol amendments, basically submit questions to FDA in order to see what we need to do for the next stage of development, and ultimately um, build regulatory strategies for any upcoming assets that we might have. One specific achievement that I felt was pretty impactful in my career was I had previously worked for a big company, Pfizer. You probably have heard of it. um, and at the time that I joined the company, we were at the tail end of a 10-year study called Precision, and it was one of the biggest trials, cardiovascular outcome safety trials that I think has ever been done. And ultimately, I essentially served as a U.S. lead for kind of the closure of this journey, and that included having an advisory committee discussion with FDA, and ultimately to include the results of the precision study into the United States prescribing information. And it felt like a really proud moment and a good achievement because ultimately we had this discussion and closed off this journey ultimately that was spanned 10 plus years, because it was triggered by a safety issue from Vioxx removing it from the market back previous before the study even started. And anyway, it just felt like things came full circle, and so sometimes that really doesn't always happen, and you move on to different things. And so I mean, even though I wasn't there for the beginning of the study, it felt like you were able to contribute, or I was able to contribute to closing the book on this one really challenging project. So I found out I found out about RAPS probably when at my very first job. I had a couple colleagues who were studying for the RAC certification, and I found that this was a nice community to be able to meet other regulatory professionals, learn more about strategies that are being used globally in order to help get patients medicines that we're creating, and share ideas and collaborate. So I thought it would be great to be a RAPS member, and luckily some companies allow you to be a RAPS member through their corporate memberships. And even if I didn't have that, I would still be a RAPS member because I think it gives you access to a lot of good resources, and access to things like this, the RAPS Convergence, where you're face-to-face and learning a lot about what people are doing, learning what's new, and learning what's on the cutting edge of regulatory science. So of my career in the sense that I think there are always providing resources and things for me to learn about. If there's also a question that I have of something I'm working on, I bet I could probably look it up, and there might be an article or something about it on the RAPS website. I do feel like there's a lot of opportunities also to strive within the field and basically be be more known within the regulatory industry. A couple things that I plan on probably following up on in terms of like even helping to write for RAPS, maybe eventually the RAC certification. I think RAPS has essentially improved, my knowledge of regulatory science and just opportunities that are available to me and to learn. I think it's regulatory science and strategy is something that can be a little challenging to communicate in terms of what we do. For me, I think I've gotten it down to a pretty good science, though. I think what essentially I tell people is that my job is to work with health authorities in order to serve as that liaison between my company and the health authority to see how we can get a drug in development from point A to point B and then ultimately to market. And so essentially how we do this is, we work with our cross-functional team. We define key messaging, define questions, define, really the pathway that we want to follow as a company, and then work as best as we can to make sure that this is aligned, the strategy is aligned across health authorities, and then go from there essentially.